Okay, hello everyone. Our group will be presenting on the Asian American Political Alliance, also known as the AAPA. Our presentation is divided into 3 parts. I will begin with the historical context and background of the organization. Then Alicia will go over the key concepts, and Alexander will provide the analysis of the Asian American Political Alliance impacts. Okay. All right. Question time. Before we start, I want to ask everyone a quick question. When you hear the term Asian American, what comes to mind? Let's take a few moments to think about that. Okay. Now, did you guys know the term Asian American didn't always exist? In fact, it was created in 1968 by the founders of the Asian American Political Alliance. Before that, people were just described by separate ethnic groups such as Chinese, Japanese, or Filipino, not just as one community. This question helps us see why AAPA was so important because they created a political identity that brought Asian groups together. Now, I'm going to show a 5-minute video that introduces the AAPA and highlights some of the organization's original statements and beliefs.
In May 1968, at UC Berkeley, graduate students Yuji Ichioka and Emma G founded an organization that would fundamentally reshape Asian American identity and politics, the Asian American Political Alliance, or AAPA. Movements throughout American history, no organization had specifically addressed their community's unique needs and experiences. The timing was significant, as the 1960s represented a transformative period in American social movement. This idea grew with the concept of Black Power, which had gained influence due to leaders like Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael, who advocated for minority communities to have the right to control themselves, separate from white America. This idea is also known as autonomy. The AAPA was formed within this context of social change. In 1969, they published the Asian American Political Alliance Statement, which helped shape the Asian American movement by redefining what it meant to be Asian American, aligning the Asian American struggle with other marginalized groups, and calling for solidarity between these different race-based movements. Firstly, the document highlights the creation of a new Asian American identity. Before the formation of AAPA, the term Asian American did not exist in common usage. People of Asian descent typically identified with specific ethnicities, or they were broadly referred to using the outdated and problematic term Oriental. The AAPA statement strategically begins each of its goals with the phrase, "We Asian Americans." This wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a deliberate move to create a unified identity based on shared racial oppression. By emphasizing their collective racial identity, the AAPA acknowledged the shared experiences of discrimination faced by all people of Asian descent in America, no matter their specific ethnic origin. They recognized Asian Americans as a distinct racial minority with common political interests despite their diverse cultural backgrounds. This created solidarity that allowed for more political organization and activism, transforming how Asian Americans understood themselves and their place in American society. The AAPA explicitly rejected what we now call the model minority myth, and instead aligned Asian Americans with other racially marginalized communities. Model minority myth is a harmful stereotype that says all Asian Americans easily fit into American society and have no trouble achieving success, following the rules, and blending, or in other words, assimilating into white society. This myth serves two purposes. It falsely suggests Asian Americans don't experience racism, and it makes it seem like other racial minorities are struggling because they're not working hard enough, or because they have the wrong values, instead of acknowledging that the real problem is America's racist power structures. Declaring America a fundamentally racist society, the AAPA directly rejects white American structures, which society claimed they had successfully assimilated into. They continue stating, "We Asian Americans believe heretofore we have have been relating to white standards of acceptability and affirmed the right of self-definition and self-determination. This challenged the expectation that Asian Americans should conform to white societal standards. Instead, the AAPA affirmed their right to define their own identity and control their community, independent of white America's expectations. Rather than accepting the model minority positioning as honorary whites, the AAPA deliberately aligned Asian American experiences with other racial minorities by stating that they too face racism and oppression and do not conform to white systems of power. Finally, the AAPA's vision extended beyond Asian American communities. The Asian American Political Alliance statement also advocated for interracial solidarity among movements, meaning they wanted different racial communities to stand together in the fight for freedom. The statement aligned Asian American struggles with other fights against racial oppression, declaring they support all non-white liberation movements and believe that all minorities, in order to be truly liberated, must have complete control within their respective communities. Additionally, the AAPA took a strong stance against the Vietnam War, opposing the imperialistic policies being pursued by the American government. This position connected struggles for racial justice in the United States with similar struggles internationally. More than supporting other racial minorities in America, the AAPA also supported efforts for freedom globally. They believed that all these movements were part of the same push for justice, and that the goal wasn't just to fit into the dominant system, but to gain real power and control over their own lives and communities. This ultimately reflected the larger shift in the 1960s social movement from focusing on rights to securing power. The legacy of the Asian American Political Alliance extends far beyond the late 1960s. Overall, the AAPA statement demonstrated the power of collective action and racial solidarity. Their work highlighted that struggles for justice and liberation are interconnected globally. This solidarity laid the groundwork for future interracial activism, including the Third World Liberation Front, in which Berkeley's AAPA played a significant organizing role.
Okay, now that we've seen the video.
People hate me.
Oops.
People fear
sorry.
me.
Okay. Okay, now that we've seen the video, I want to go a little deeper into the origins of AAPA, especially where it was created, when it began, and who founded it. The Asian American Political Alliance was founded in 1968 at UC Berkeley. In 1968, it was a major turning point in American history. This was during the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnamese War, and larger students were protesting across the country. Berkeley, in particular, was a center for activism and political organizing. The founders of AAPA were UC Berkeley students known as Yuji Ichioka and Emma G. They recognized that Asian Americans had no unified political voice, and they wanted to create an organization that would bring Asian ethnic groups together, along with a small group of Asian American college students. They formed the very first organization to call itself Asian American. In fact, UG created the term Asian American. Now I want to talk about the historical background that made the creation of AAPA so important. During the civil rights movements, Asian American students often felt invisible. They saw African Americans, Latinos, and Native American activists demanding justice and equal rights, but Asian Americans were rarely included in national conversations about racism and inequality. On top of that, Asian ethnic groups were not seen as one community. They were understood as completely separate groups, such as Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and so on. Each group had its own immigration history and its own struggles and its own stereotypes placed on them by American society. Because of this separation, there was very little political unity. The idea of all Asian in America coming together under single identity didn't exist yet. A- AAPA was the first organization to basically say, even though we come from different Asian backgrounds, we face similar forms of racism and discrimination, and we should unite. They believed in solidarity, meaning they fought with other groups who were also fighting for equality. They also believed in self determination, the idea that communities should have the power to define their own identity, tell their own stories, and fight for their own rights. Therefore, AAPA was more than just a student. And therefore, AAPA was more than just a student club. It was a political movement. It brought Asian American students together at a moment when they were often overlooked. It created the term Asian American, turning it into a shared identity rather than separate ethnic labels. Now I'll hand it over to Aisha.
Hello, guys. I will be going over the key concepts, campaigns, mission, and social issues of AAPA. So, some of the key concepts were Pan-Asian identity, where they were uniting all Asian ethnic groups together, and another one was self-determination, where communities were fighting for their own rights, and third world solidarity, which was linking Asian American struggles with other communities of color. And for the campaigns, they had a couple of campaigns. One of them was Third World Liberation Front Strike, which was one of the longest student strikes in the US history, and it pushed universities to create ethnic studies departments. And the anti another campaign was the anti-Vietnam War activism, which opposed US militarism and how Southeast Asians were portrayed. And they also had community empowerment work, which included housing rights, worker support, and anti-racist education. And then for their mission, it was to build political unity across Asian communities, challenge racism, imperialism, and discrimination, and empower young activists and community voices. And for their social issues that AAPA addressed was stereotypes like perpetual foreigner or model minority, racism and violence against Asian communities, lack of Asian representations in politics, anti-war and anti-imperialist issues, and lastly, access to education, housing, healthcare, and labor rights.